Hey, well, what's up, Colliders? Welcome back to The Collision. Daniel here. And Disney is known for making amusement parks and theme rides. They're also known for making movies, and sometimes they run out of ideas and they decide to make movies of their theme park rides. Jungle Cruise, following the tradition of Pirates of the Caribbean and some of the other recent attempts to kind of double dip on their properties is with Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson starring Emily Blunt. Just hit theaters. I've seen it, so let's talk about it. So this isn't a movie that I necessarily, had like a paper chain calendar in eager anticipation to see, but I thought the trailers looked fine. It looked fun. It kind of looked like it scratched an itch that hasn't been scratched for a while, the sort of old kind of throwback family Disney movies. And essentially that's what this movie is. It's kind of hard to really determine if this is a good movie or a bad movie, or if it's so bad that it's good, or if it's supposed to be bad and that makes it good. It just sort of is. And that'll make more sense as I kind of unpack it a bit. But probably the best way to describe this movie is it's very much kind of like the child of Pirates of the Caribbean and National Treasure. It sort of takes both of those. It takes kind of the supernatural, kind of exotic locations of the Pirates movies with sort of the treasure hunt and kind of goofy problem-solving detective, archaeologist kind of stuff from the National Treasure movie, and kind of mashes those together to do this treasure hunt, search for the sort of long-lost essentially it's the fountain of youth that these characters are trying to find. And again, if you like those two franchises, then you'll probably like this movie to a certain degree. There is some fun. There is some fun moments, some kind of fun adventures. Definitely not really a slow movie. It's constantly throwing stuff at you. And I would say that watching the movie very much kind of feels like going on the actual ride. I don't know if you guys have ever been to Disneyland and gone on the Jungle Cruise ride, but this kind of felt like that ride. You show up, you sit down, and this movie just sort of keeps moving forward to one kind of attraction, one kind of thrill here, and then they move on to the next one, and you sort of kind of chug along. There's not really a super cohesive story. It doesn't feel very organic. It's just sort of you're on this ride that Disney's taking you on, and you're seeing what they're showing you. I think if you guys have been on the actual Jungle Cruise ride, it's one of those rides that no one necessarily dislikes or thinks isn't fun, but no one like runs back to go ride it again, or no one's talking about it on the way home. That's kind of what this movie I think is destined to be. It's definitely not like a great movie, or even probably a good movie. It's not a movie that's just terrible, that's like offensively bad in any ways and just a complete disaster. It's just sort of a movie you see and then you kind of forget about it by the time you get home. I don't think a lot of people are going to be turning it back on Disney Plus when it releases there. It just sort of is. It is sort of an experience. It's 2 hours of sort of some kind of low-hanging fruit thrills, and that's about all that this movie has to offer in that way. As far as the ride, there is the way they, it is somewhat clever how they kind of do an ode to the ride. And in some ways, this movie is kind of an ode to two things. One's the actual ride. You have The Rock, Dwayne Johnson, is the Jungle Cruise guy leading these jungle tours. He's kind of the stand-in for the host on the actual ride, and he's essentially taking people on a version of the Disney ride where it's all kind of fake, and he's telling all his puns and kind of terrible jokes, and that he's sort of living the theme park ride before he gets kind of pulled off into the adventure. And I'll talk about in a minute when we get to some of the themes that there is some tension between kind of the nostalgia of this is what the ride was, and those that are going to get, if they've ridden the ride, they'll catch some of these references, and then also trying to do something kind of new. And for the most part, I thought it was, if you've been on the ride before or you're just familiar with it, there was some kind of fun wink stuff in the movie. And like I said, the other kind of ode that this movie has is just those old kind of Disney family movies. They don't really make those movies anymore. If you have Disney Plus, there's a bunch of those movies on there, and they're all very dated and old and kind of grainy, but they just don't really make that. They make cartoons and stuff for kids, but just sort of those live action fun adventure movies. And this is, in some ways, this movie is just sort of like the template for those movies. It's not a parody per se, but but it's definitely just sort of trying to give you all the elements that sort of make up these movies. And I think, in one sense, this movie doesn't have probably a single original idea anywhere to be found in this movie. It is very much, everything's kind of a caricature. It's all following just sort of this template. You've seen it 100 times before. And for a lot of people, that's probably just going to make them tune out of the movie, be bored. A lot of the enjoyment that I did get out of this film was just accepting that that's what this movie is. It's not trying to reinvent the wheel or be something fresh or have these clever ideas. It's just sort of trying to be an ode, a very kind of caricature template ode to these sort of older movies that you grew up with as a kid. All the characters sort of fill their role in that. The story is predictable in a way that those old Disney movies were. So again, this is not an original movie by any means, but it was somewhat refreshing to kind of have that old throwback feel to it. Maybe last thing this about the film itself, the tone, it is hard. In one sense, it is sort of a throwback to these old family films, but it's hard to determine kind of who this movie is geared for, or if it's trying to reach, spread their reach too far and not really appealing to anyone. It is a little kind of scary or violent for younger viewers. Some of these like cursed characters that are cursed by the river, these conquistadors, and they're all have like snakes and animals, and they're kind of these tormented souls that are chasing the main characters. They can be kind of frightening, and some of the characters like snakes are attacking and chewing on people's faces, and there's not like blood or gore or anything, but it is pretty kind of can be more frightening for a young viewer. But on the same time, this isn't like the Pirates movies that were really geared for more kind of all ages and older. This is a pretty silly movie. It is very much kind of tonally for children. So and some of the thematic material was kind of geared for older people. So I struggled a little bit to know. I don't think this is a film I would necessarily want my 6-year-olds to watch, but it's definitely felt too kiddie for someone my age. So I don't really know what they were going for, but the tone is a little uneven throughout this film. As far as content to consider, there's no that I caught no profanity. There is frequent like OMGs and uses of the Lord's name in vain. It's kind of weird. The Emily Blunt's character kind of says "Oh my goodness" a lot of times, but then she also will say OMG, and there was probably a dozen or more references of that. So that, as far as profanity, that would sort of be the only thing to be concerned of. Language-wise, there's no other profanity, but it was kind of unfortunate just how much they did that. As far as sex, there no real sexual content. There is a couple kind of innuendos that at least I took as innuendos that a younger viewer wouldn't. But there's no like on-screen skin or anything to see in that way. And there is some sexuality, which I'll get to when we start talking about the thematic material, but nothing just sort of on the surface in that way. Violence, like I said, this isn't like a bloody, gory film. It's a Disney kind of family film, but there is some kind of scarier moments, and characters do die. So this isn't just all kind of rainbows and butterflies. It is a little more kind of dark in some moments, so be aware of that. And then the last sort of thing that's on the surface is kind of magic. Again, I'll touch on this in a moment too, but there is kind of supernatural, kind of almost pagan magic, and they kind of talk about like the power of the moon goddess and some of that. It is like a supernatural story trying to find this magic tree. So again, as Christians, this is something to be aware of as well. As far as themes in this movie, I wasn't necessarily sure how to boil all this into sort of what one overarching theme, but I think the best way to maybe think about it or approach it is it's kind of very much like a tension between the past and the present. The film kind of on the surface deals with that, trying to be nostalgic for this very old kind of original Disney ride that a lot of us our memories of or riding it as a kid. There is sort of that tug to kind of celebrate the past, but then there's also a lot of moments where the film is trying to kind of correct the past. And in some ways, this is, if you follow much kind of news or pop culture, this film's kind of an extension of the real world controversies that have gone on with this ride and just Disney rides in general, trying to kind of update and, to confront maybe some of the racial stereotypes in this, or things that people have trouble with. Splash Mountain, some of those rides. The film's kind of an extension of that, because it is kind of celebrating in a nostalgic, loving way what the ride is. But on the other hand, it is very much trying to also kind of infuse or kind of graft a very modern kind of mindset and ideologies onto it. And you kind of see it across the board. There's feminism, and kind of some of that is very much throughout this film. Emily Blunt's character, like I said, most of these characters are kind of caricatures, and she is essentially just sort of a strong, no nonsense woman, very kind of modern, progressive. Her like defining trait is that she wears pants. She's called in the movie, all the characters just call her Pants, and every time she meets a new character, they're shocked that, again, this film was set kind of during like the First World War or Second World War, so it's not, so at the time that would be a progressive thing, but it is very much this. She is a pants wearing woman, and everyone calls her Pants. I wasn't even sure what her actual character name was until the third act of the film, and even like the very controversial kind of headhunter character from the ride that has got a lot of people upset, and some adjustments going to the ride. In the film, the version is instead of being a kind of this male cannibal headhunter, it's a very strong-willed woman chief that kind of leads this peaceful tribe. And again, I'm not necessarily saying that that's bad or that doesn't work, but it is very much kind of on the nose, pushing sort of this new kind of progressive modern woman. Again, like I said, the kind of the headhunter, the native characters, they sort of pull the rug out from under you and do a very much like a spoof on the real life controversies about that. And sort of these primitive people from the ride, these characters are shown more in a light of they're very peaceful and friendly and very noble. And you can definitely read it against the backdrop of some of the stuff, the conversations going on. And then there is of the kind of the three main characters, there's The Rock, there's Emily Blunt, and then in the movie it's her character, and he's a gay character. And actually he's a good character in the film. He's a lot of the comic relief, but he does have a moment where he's talking with The Rock, and he's really having a very modern, kind of progressive, kind of love is love who you want to love conversation, and it's sort of an awkward. It's one of those moments in the film that I'm not sure who will be happy about it. In some ways, it's very much hitting you over the head with sort of this LGBTQ. The world's evil. It's let people love who they love, but they dance around it so much that a kid wouldn't realize, he never says that he's attracted to a male. It's very kind of alluded to and kind of wink, and so it's very much tries to, I think, to kind of have its cake and eat it too. So I don't know, I haven't seen the response to that, but it is sort of an example of just kind of all these sort of more modern conversations and controversies and ideologies that we see in today's world kind of being forced into this film that's set in the past, based on a past nostalgic toy. And I think, I don't know if those two kind of competing agendas always jives very well or has much synergy throughout the film. Maybe this is a last theme, is this sort of spiritual seeking. Again, the magical elements, I know for some Christians are going to be concerning anytime there's any sort of magic and kind of pagan spirituality and anything like that. Christians are understandably cautious or not sure, and some of them choose to not, to very kind of reject all of that. For me, the magic in this film is not preaching magic. It's not pointing kids towards anything kind of pagan. It is this fantasy backdrop. But I think it kind of does open up a kind of a bigger conversation just for kind of spiritually searching for meaning, for spiritual satisfaction. The magic tree that they're trying to find kind of represents that as sort of this object that they're all going towards. There's a lot of talk, the characters, about their souls, and characters that kind of have cursed souls based on kind of their actions and their hatred, and kind of going about it the wrong way, trying to take advantage and use this life-giving tree and magic rather than kind of using it for good. So again, it's not some kind of Christian allegory by any means, but But it is interesting. Anytime, I think as Christians, anytime a film is kind of wrestling, talking about souls and kind of, the world beyond and seeking kind of more spiritual realities, all the scientific characters at the start of the film are very much can't believe that there would ever be this magical tree. And, and Emily Blunt's character is kind of going against that and holding on to this sort of hope. And even the film starts with like a voiceover where the narrator is saying, there's always some truth in myths. And I think, I don't think the magic in this film is going to encourage kids and young viewers to go join the occult and get into magic. But I do think it's healthy just to, as sort of a reminder that there is sort of a spiritual reality, that we do have souls and we are kind of on this journey. So again, I think there is stuff for Christians to kind of latch onto and just work through, even if it's not presented wholly in a very Christian worldview. But in the end, this film, it's fine for what it is. It's not a film I'll probably ever watch again. I don't know if I'll let my kids watch it. It's maybe a little over their head. I don't know necessarily who this film is going to be for, but hey, if you enjoy this film, then all power to you. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts. If you do see this film, did you enjoy it? Did you like the way it kind of gave an ode to the original ride? If you've written that, let's just have a conversation in the comment section, and just some of the themes that you guys saw, maybe I missed, or if you saw some stuff that I didn't, love to talk about that. Encourage you guys, if you haven't done so, subscribe to our channel, become a collider. We got a lot of stuff going on here. We'd love to have you just join the community that we have. Like this video, guys. Stay safe and continue to collide with your world for Christ.